three words: advanced aerial threat. Who in the CIA, NSA, DIA tells at least the United States of America that we're not alone in this universe? We have never been alone in this universe.
The U.S. government really has kept that secret, not only from the American people, which is bad enough, but even kept it from itself.
The UFO community has been portrayed as conspiracy theorists and tinfoil hats, and we're crazy. And the government is now admitting that UFOs are real and disclosure is here. Suddenly, they're our friend? No.
America's defense establishment is finally admitting some of what it knows.
This could have been a chance to say we're going to collaborate with the representatives of the people in what is supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people.
If what they tell you is the truth, there is no need to withhold it from public.
We've entered a quantum age, making a leap not only in technology, but also in consciousness. Companies are now creating non-sentient replacement humans. They look just like you and I. They're intended for customer service and things such as that, but these neons, as they're called, could be more nefarious than that.
We're dealing with a fight. There are forces behind the scenes that doesn't want any of this information to come out.
There's still a lot of truth that has yet to be revealed.
I was one of those quote-unquote men in black, but I realize it's probably better now to be known as men in white, bringing truth to the topic.
The problem with the truth is, the truth might be terrifying.
Oren.
Wow. Good evening, everybody. How are you? This is an amazing night. I'm coming to you live from the bunker, and tonight is a very, very, very special presentation that we are doing for and about the observers. And for all of you who are observers, and throughout the community, hashtag the observers, hashtag observer, hashtag observers. Get the movement right now. Get involved. Get started. The Observers is an amazing film, and it's an honor and a privilege for me, your host of Fade to Black, to have been brought into the team to help in the making of the film as a producer, and also to get a little bit of FaceTime to get my thoughts out there that I've been just yelling and screaming about to the best of my ability with these pipes that I have to get the message out to the world. And this film, it's perfect. It's perfect timing. It's got a perfect cast and an amazing director, a team behind it. And we brought together the best and the brightest that have been out there and fighting as an observer for our community for a very, very long time. So this is what we're doing. We're streaming on multiple platforms tonight. We're coming to you also on the Fade to Black Facebook channel. And I came in tonight, and we're going to be doing a few of these, by the way. This is the first. We've got a great setup tonight. Chris is engineering from the East Coast and is directing this entire presentation. And we've got a different format than what you're used to here on Fade to Black 2 as well, where I've got people working for me tonight. And it's going to be great. It's going to be visually stunning, and it's going to be a great conversation. I'm just the host. Okay? I don't have to have a real job tonight. The real job is going to be handled by director Roger R. Richards. And I would like to bring in Roger now and say welcome. And Roger is going to be sitting down with Richard Dolan. And I get to Roger, welcome. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. Thanks, man. It's good to see you, brother.
And always remember, a good director directs. A great director does more. I mean, never forget that. Never forget that. And you have been leading this charge now. You've been laser focused on all of this for over 10 years. You've been an activist for much longer than that. But this film, this production, this gathering of minds at this point in history, the timing just couldn't have been better. We got it done with your direction. We got it done as a team. It's here, and the movement has started. How do you feel?
I think it's incredible to see what came together at a time where, this topic is really on the forefront of, everyone's conversations right now. Like the ability for the mainstream media to be covering this, conversation in whole, the types of things that are coming out in these reports, for example, that, were happening while we were making this film. It was an exhilarating experience because none of us really knew where this was ending up. We were right in the middle of this being released at the time. People were still wondering if we were going to get the full report at those times. The other things were coming out. And so it was a really incredible experience to just work with, some of the most amazing minds and researchers and experience kind of ufology world in the same time when all of this stuff was happening in the mainstream, and then channeling that into a piece of art that is this film here, and what came out of it, and the whole team pouring their hearts and love and connection into this film. This film is made by people that are experiencers. It's made by people that are researchers. It's made by people in this community, and it's part of a direct action movement out there to raise awareness, to bring these things to the top of people's consciousness, and the understanding of it's not just on Fox News, it's not just on CNN that these things are being acknowledged. There is a whole movement of people that have been having anomalous experiences, observers all over the world that have seen things out of place that don't make sense, experienced technology in some form or another beyond what is out in the public. And that is what's canonized in the film. And I think all of us really kind of poured our heart and love into the community to create that conversation and make it as relevant as possible to the aggregate of all the things that are now under the umbrella of what is disclosure and the observer movement.
And I want to thank you for all of your hard work. And the other thing is, for me, is I interview. That's my job. I interview. I'm an interviewer. I interview. And I was able to sit back and watch you take over and interview and create conversations with the entire cast. And it was amazing to see your style. Now we're going to bring in Richard Dolan. Richard. Now, here's the deal. Richard and I have had shows, conversations. We've done conferences. We have done numerous panels. We have asked each other and answered every possible question when it comes to this subject. And Richard got to sit down with you and have a conversation that I was there for. And I was so proud and impressed on the way that you two were able to interact with each other. Now, before I get out of here, because what I'm referring to now, our audience tonight is going to get to enjoy Roger's interview chops and conversation style once again here with you, Richard. How great was it to not have me asking questions for a change, and you get a mind like Roger to come in and pull things out of you?
Yeah. Hey, Jimmy, and hi, Roger. Great to be here. Yeah, the funny thing about that, you and I have known each other for almost 10 years now. Roger, we had never communicated. I'd never talked to Roger, never had a conversation. So I truly did not know what to expect. And I will just say here, I was very impressed by the quality of the questions that you asked me, Roger. It was obvious immediately that you had done a great deal of thinking about the subject of UFOs in general, and also just about me. I really feel like you must have done some kind of background research on my own personal interests, and I think you did a lot of homework beforehand. It really showed. And then what I was realizing, even while we were interviewing, is you were obviously doing this with everyone. And what I was interested in at the time that we were doing the questions last summer was, where's this guy going to go with this? Like, I really didn't know how you would lay out the direction of this documentary, not fully. So it was interesting when I finally did get to see a screener. I thought, oh, wow, this is great. You actually had this wonderful way of presenting layers of this subject, and you starting with one layer, and then we go to a deeper layer, and then a deeper layer, and then a deeper layer. And then by the time we get to the end of this documentary, it's this treatment, I guess, really is what it is. You'd gone really deep, and it was all because of the way you had structured the interviews, I think. So that was a real testament to your vision. I think it turned out very well.
Well,
Thank you.
I'm gonna back out of here. I want to kick back and enjoy this evening. You guys behave, have a great conversation, and I'll circle back and wrap things up when I'm ready to break in and interrupt when I can't take it anymore. Fair enough?
Yes. Thank you, Jimmy.
Sounds great, Jimmy.
I'll see you guys in a bit.
Okay. Excellent.
Later, man. Okay.
Yeah, I was just kind of hearing everything you were saying, and Richard, like for me to be able to go through and understand your work and to look at the things that you've contributed to this community, this movement, the thought bubble, this collective conversation of people that are trying to understand things that are at this moment unexplainable. And so for me, like I had very similar, feelings of, even intimidation going up against, somebody that has spent, the majority of their academic adult, career into seriously researching this and taking it seriously, despite all of the constant, criticisms from mainstream and just all of the, the ways they try to downplay the subject. To me, like it has so much integrity to be able to do that and stick with that. And then when I got into understanding more about you and really kind of what that sacrifice for you as an academic, and also in your world in that space, and the sacrifice that you made to step into that role, to be that archetype in this moment. And now I thought that was incredibly touching. And one of the things that that really stood out too was your care for the United States, like your care for this country, and understanding, how incredibly unique we are in the global spectrum of things, and why disclosure ties to that. Those are all things that just fascinated me. And to be perfectly honest, when I got to the cutting room floor with all of you guys, I had 20 plus hours of footage or something. It was a nightmare just trying to select the things that just absolutely needed to be in there under a time, restraint, because there was so much stuff. And so we've just been releasing that to the public, chunk and chunk, so it can kind of have the full conversations for anybody that's, interested in kind of getting behind that. But I wanted to just bring that type of conversation that you and I had there, which, Jimmy has talked about my style. I just wanted to share that with you here tonight and just kind of explore the things that didn't make it into the film necessarily, but, and then also expound on that. And so one of the things I kind of wanted to open up the floor with is, there has been, every single social justice movement, has come and gone based off of a collective of people in a counterculture that's, kind of bubbling up in the form of some type of resistance. And the UFO community and the ufology topic is so powerful in regards to what it could mean to humanity. Why do you feel like there hasn't been a movement really until now that takes it seriously to try to push instead of wait for disclosure, but actually pull it out?
Well, there have been movements in the past. Like, we're not the first. I would say it's gone further now than it has gone in the past. But I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that even as early as the 1950s, there were people who were very engaged in the UFO subject. There were the first UFO or civilian organizations that started up during that decade. One of them in particular, known as NICAP, was absolutely committed to ending UFO secrecy, at least in the best way that they could do it. They were all about getting congressional hearings on UFOs and trying to get that in public. There was one opportunity in the early 1960s where it looked like NICAP might be able to do it, and then the rug was pulled out from underneath them at the 11th hour. They were going up against some very, very difficult opposition, obviously. You have the same crescendo that developed in the 1960s, where it looked as though there might be this opening for a kind of disclosure. People were not using the word at that time, but an admission by the government that this subject was real. And that ended up in something called the Condon Committee, which was a pseudo-scientific analysis of the UFO subject that essentially ended up debunking it in the late 60s. And then, there were various furtive types of attempts in later decades of the 20th century to get this thing going. None of them really came to much. You get the disclosure movement in 2001 that was led by Dr. Stephen Greer. Folks like Danny Sheehan were very much involved in that as well. And then Steve Bassett comes along in the early 21st century with his X conferences. This movement's been bubbling along. There has been this attempt, but it's true when you say like it never got traction. I've given this a lot of thought myself as to why. And I think what you're really dealing with is the most significant cover-up of modern times is the UFO cover-up. I think it comes down simply to that. You've got a situation starting with the 1940s where the United States national security community explicitly organized with major media, all the media outlets that existed back then, and as they evolved to ridicule and to dismiss and debunk this subject. And so that there was just no breathing space. There's no oxygen for UFO research in a public domain to go anywhere. And it was relegated to the fringes. It couldn't get into the academic world. So there was no official, sanctified, official stamp of approval there. And it didn't get any scientific funding. You can't do science if there's no money, and there's no money for this in that realm. So it could never get off the ground, so to speak. And frankly, I think it only has changed in the last 4 years with the efforts of the group TTSA, to the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. We're talking Tom DeLonge, Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo, and all of those folks, Hal Puthoff, who... it still amazes me to this day how there are people who say, that's a CIA disinformation op. I'm like, are you kidding me, man? These people actually, no one else in the history of ufology was able to move that needle at all in the public conversation until they came along. Whatever else one says, they got the disclosure conversation going. They were able to get 3 videos declassified from the Pentagon, which was done in a very clever way, it turns out, and not without opposition from within the Pentagon. They were the ones who were able to connect with the New York Times, Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal to get coverage. So I think what we were seeing in the last 4 years is a breakthrough by genuinely interested people who had their own reasons for wanting to promote some truthfulness on UFOs. And that opened the door a little bit for the rest of the very highly controlled establishment media, which we are still dealing with, of course. So we're in a different era, but I would hasten to add, I do not believe that we're out of the woods here. I do not believe that there's some inevitable disclosure that we're going to be looking at from any kind of government sources. I don't think so. I think if we ever see anything like that, it will be when they've got no choice. Their backs are pushed to the wall and they are going to be forced to admit something. But right now they haven't done it. There are several red lines that have not been crossed, and probably the most important one is that of a real cover-up, a real conspiracy. That's not been acknowledged. If we can get to a point where there's an acknowledgement of actual technology like flying saucers technology or bodies, then you go to cover up. And that's going to be a very difficult hurdle for anyone to want to cross, because we're in an era of a global totalitarian, genuinely fascist digital revolutions happening all around us. And in that era, this new era, you're not supposed to believe in conspiracy theories. The UFO cover-up is the greatest conspiracy theory of all time. I mean, honestly, what's bigger than that? So for me to imagine that there's going to be some official acknowledgement. It's like, don't believe in conspiracy theories. Well, except the UFO one. Okay, that's true, but none of the other. Like, that's just not going to happen. I can't see that voluntarily happening. So I think what we're likely to see is a continued watering down of the UFO subject, which I think we are seeing, and as much of a walking back from the precipice of acknowledgement of a cover-up as possible. And, you know, it won't be an easy thing to do because there have been admissions that have been made, and it's going to be difficult to walk them all back. But we're in a very controlled media. You know, Google, YouTube control things greater than they've ever done before. I think it's entirely possible that this can be managed even at this point.
I couldn't agree more.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it definitely got into the conversation that's going to keep on going around that. And you know, one of the things too, I just kind of want to highlight is that the people that have laid the groundwork, like you had said and highlighted, you know, going back to the 1930s, 40s, 50s, all the way up till today, you know, people like Dr. Greer, Disclosure Project, and you know, Tom DeLonge, etc., and TTSA. These people have, you know, laid the way for kind of where things are evolving now. And then the other side of that is the movement, the grassroots movement of people, experiencers that are in the millions around the world, that have experienced this exotic technology, you know, in some form or another, whether it's just seeing it in the sky or it's having, you know, a close encounter or an experience with, you know, what they claim to be extraterrestrial beings or beings that are not human.
They are the important missing pieces of this puzzle. And it's really good that you in the observers, you know, brought at least some reasonable attention to these people, because what's being lost in the UFO UAP discussion today is exactly this element. The really difficult questions are not being raised at all. We're still at this, oh, gee, is there something out there? Are there aliens? Like, my God, we're in the pre-kindergarten level of discussion relating to this subject. And what is actually happening is that millions and millions of people have interacted with this phenomenon. In many cases, it's been the most extraordinary, sometimes traumatic, sometimes incredible experience of their lives. And yet they talk to no one about it because it's like, oh, you can't talk about UFOs. So think about what it does to someone's personality and their psychology. Like, this incredible thing happens to you and you tell no one, or maybe a couple of friends. I mean, there's something wrong with that. So that's important. And then the fact is, it needs to be discussed for another reason, which is that these interactions are by some other intelligence. And who the hell are they? Like, we're not asking that question nearly enough. Are they good guys? Are they not good guys? Are they here to help us? Are they not here to help us? Sometimes that's difficult to know, but we need to be asking. And then we want to know, what are they actually doing when people encounter these beings? Certain things are clearly happening, and we need to be talking about that. And in fact, I think that element of the UFO discussion has I don't want to say it's disappeared entirely in the last 4 years, but it's really gone to the back burner, where we're talking about these military UAP encounters. Now, I'm personally very interested in that. That was probably the first thing that got me engaged with the UFO subject, were military encounters. But the fact is, where the rubber truly hits the road is in person, being to being contact. It's like, what's happening when we're meeting with these beings, and what are they all about? And this is why this highly deep and artistic treatment, I think it is an artistic treatment that you did here with the observers, why that's important, because you ask a lot of those key questions. This is a subject, UFO subject is a steep learning curve. This is the thing, a lot of skeptical people, especially the smart skeptics, are the worst. The smart skeptics are actually the dumbest skeptics that I find, honestly. And you know why? It's because they've got a good education and they've got good scientific training, and then they assume that, oh yeah, UFOs, no biggie. I'm going to waltz in here and I've got it all figured out. And they don't have it figured out. This subject is vastly more complex than they have any idea.
I know, completely.
And so the learning curve is steep, and don't just think you can waltz in here and you're going to master it in a couple of months. I had that fond, foolish idea more than 25 years ago. I thought, oh yeah, I'll figure this out. Is this a thing? Is this not a thing? And the next thing I knew, like I'm in quicksand here. This is a seriously deep subject that has implications for everything. So it takes time to get into all of the depth and complexity of what this subject means. It prompts us to ask some of the most important, deep questions of human existence. Like, what the hell are we? What are we? Have we been manipulated by these other beings? Are we being manipulated by them now? That's a fair question to ask. It may be yes, it may be no, but one should be asking that question, frankly. And then, how many of them are here? What's their infrastructure? Why are there ships as large as small cities that are sometimes seen up there? And what are they doing detaching these smaller craft? What the hell are these beings doing in these little small cities that sometimes are being seen, these motherships? Why are they being seen under the oceans? Like, good Lord, there's so much going on here. And then what's their mental capability? How are they able to get inside our heads? Because they surely do seem to be able at times to get inside our heads and to manipulate our emotions, impair or enhance maybe our cognitive faculties when they wish to do so. Like all of this. Like these are just some of the most awe-inspiring questions. And we don't hear any of this in the ridiculously low-level mainstream establishment media conversations that are taking place here. And I understand, like, you got to do baby steps, but this topic is a lot more serious than just, is the Navy encountering unknown drone UAP aircraft?
Most definitely. And I think we'll get into kind of what this topic encompasses as far as an umbrella and what falls under that here, when we come back for a break. We're going to take a break right now, and then we'll be back here in 5 minutes, and we'll explore that conversation even more.
About a year later, I was in Western Pennsylvania, and I was doing a little event there. I'm at my little table selling some books, and this woman and her husband come up to my table. She was like 60 at the time. This is in 2010. And she said, I hope you don't mind, I'd like to tell you a story. And she says, when I was 15 years old, I was living in Western Pennsylvania, not far from where we were. I was in church with my mother. This is 1965. She said, in our town, everyone knew everyone, especially in church, Catholic Mass, where we all knew each other. And I'm with my mom, and in front of me is this blonde couple, supermodel gorgeous, man and a woman, in perfect blue clothing. Now, she's 15 years old. She's studying their clothing. She's totally into it. She says, the fabric was unlike anything I'd ever seen. She said, this couple stood out like a sore thumb, like everyone had to notice them. But she said, no one was looking at them. I couldn't believe it, she says. So I'm fixated on them during the Mass. And she said, and then I heard them in my mind. And what she heard was one thinking to the other, well, we appear to be fitting in pretty well here. And then the other one thinks back, yes, except for the girl behind us who can hear us. Is what she said to me. So that's all she could hear from them for the rest of the Mass. Then Mass end. Oh, by the way, she said, yeah, they didn't really seem what to know. Like, they didn't seem to know what to do in a Catholic Mass, like sit, kneel, sign of the cross, all of that stuff. Like they're looking around, they're figuring it out. They didn't fit in. When the Mass ended, they got up and out. So out of the church. And she decides to follow them. Mom's oblivious. She's like, get back here, young lady. Where do you think you're going? And she just goes, fighting her way through the crowd. She sees this couple leave the church. She sees them going across a parking lot fast. And she's trotting off after them. They go over this little hill. She gets to the top of the hill, and she sees them going across this green little field toward a wooded area. They're going into woods. Not to a parking lot, not to their car. They're going into this woods. And she starts down the hill after them, and then she stops dead in her tracks. because she said, I saw a third person at the edge of the woods. She said, remember Lurch from the Addams Family? He looked just like that guy. Very tall, like a man in black, black hat, suit. Scared her. And she stopped and she saw this blonde Nordic supermodel alien couple, whatever they were, go into the woods. Lurch turns around, follows them in. And that's the end of her story. And I'm like, what the hell is that?
All right.
Well, that was a great little clip there. Just going back and looking at that stuff. It says that the host has my mic muted still. I don't know if you guys can hear me out there, just double checking. But if the host wants to go ahead and unmute me, if that is clear there. But anyhow, Richard, can you hear me here? Are you clear?
I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I've got you. Excellent.
Okay, great.
Looking,
I see the same sign.
Yeah,
the
totally.
muted mic there.
So I don't know if we're muted here, Chris, or if we're not muted, but we're going to go ahead and just kind of get into the conversation here. So looking at that clip there, this was so incredible because, Chris chose that clip here tonight, amongst all the other cutting room floor stuff, to be able to kind of put out there. And this is an exact example of what I was saying at the end when, I'm sitting there with all of this footage with all of you guys and trying to figure out like, oh my gosh, like what really makes this 90-minute cut, stuff like this that had to go. And so one of the things that stood out to me about that clip is the conversation around the implications of what this means to Catholics or what this means to Christian communities or what this means to, religious communities in whole around the world. The idea of making contact with something outside of our world, our known human bodies here, what we have, come to understand is the only life supposedly that is here at this moment. And, it was 6 or so years ago, I think Pope Francis had said openly that he was willing to baptize, Martians at that. It was the term I think that he used. And so what are your thoughts around the religious implications of this as far as the movement goes? If we're out there pushing to pull this stuff out and you've got, your families are tied to these things and this type of stuff could burst their bubbles or challenge them in certain ways. What are your thoughts on how we can navigate that as a community or how you navigate that in your own life, in your own family and world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll answer it first personally. By the way, that story, I was surprised to hear that story in clip form like that. And that's not the only such story that's come to me like that over the years. But anyway, yeah, that was an amazing thing. In terms of like how the presence of these other beings would affect our sense of spirituality or what we would call religion. Like I think about this with me, I've developed my own spiritual beliefs over the years. I don't know if the existence of other beings has much of an impact on my own sense of spirituality, however. So, and I wonder if it really would for some people. Yes, absolutely. I mean, you've got religious communities, whether Christian or non-Christian. There's Muslim communities. There's Orthodox Jewish communities, perhaps that might, there's a lot of like strict religious communities that at least conceivably one could imagine would have some pushback against accepting how to accept these other beings. I mean, obviously with the Christian, some Christian communities, like it's very obvious there would be a contingent that would see these beings as demonic. And they will never be reconciled to the presence of these beings. It's never going to happen. And that's going to be an interesting thing. However that work develops, because I think there's no question that there will be a group of humans, and they won't all be religious, by the way. There will be a group of humans that will be the unreconcilables. They will be the new hashtag resistance if there is any kind of open acknowledgement and contact with these other beings. There's really, I think what you would find is an expansion of the current incarnation of the culture wars that we're seeing in our world today. I have a feeling like there will be individuals who will be like, yes, welcome space brothers. Like, this is the galactic community. They are here to help us become less violent, or they're here to help us advance and raise our frequency. You hear some people saying, or our vibration, or raise our consciousness in one way or another. Obviously, you're going to hear that, but there's absolutely going to be a very large number of people who are going to see this as this is a damned invasion, and we're going to fight, and we're going to maintain our sovereignty. That goes beyond religion. In terms of how this would affect something like Christianity or, you know, other religions, I mean, I've asked myself this question many, many times. I wrote a book about it over a decade ago. After disclosure, my co-author and I asked this very question, and even then, like he and I had different opinions on it, I think, but I still don't know where I stand on this. And then there's religious type philosophies like Buddhism. Would a Zen philosophy be affected by the presence of other beings here? I think the answer would be no. I don't think so. And I think would a Christian philosophy or Christian ethics, would that be affected? I think the answer is no. Like those are ethical systems that we have in place in this world that, you know, for many people are what really give the power to the faith and the religion anyway. So I don't think that's going to change for a lot of people. What will change is the cosmology, perhaps, and where we think we come from and what is our place in this universe. But, you know, that's been evolving all along anyway. I mean, that's been happening for the last several hundred years as it is, since we've hit the age of science. So I think, you know, having aliens openly acknowledged here, I don't know if that's going to solve anything or change a whole lot. There'll be the question, was Jesus an alien? And that's going to be unsolvable anyway. I don't know if the aliens were to say, yeah, actually, he was one of us. Some people would believe that, and a lot of people would be like, you're full of it. They're not going to believe that. So I don't know how some of these things can get resolved.
And these are things that, you know, this is a part of what a movement does, is it digests its understanding as it's going, from the standpoint of the movement being the most important thing around bringing unity to get an end goal. And the end goal that we're all looking for here is to pull this out, because it's not coming out unless we pull it out. And that's kind of where things are at right now, from the standpoint of, you know, the internecine warfare essentially that's going on between these intelligence agencies behind the scenes, and this fight to see who gets to roll it out, who gets to be the one that, you know, claims there's extraterrestrial life, who gets the ones to, you know, roll out this technology. And in the meantime,
right,
the world out here is suffering. We're going through COVID. We're going through lockdowns. We're going through, you know, what you've described as, you know, so poetically in the film is, you know, when they knife him in the back, you know, the American Republic from that standpoint here. And it means a lot out to the rest of the world. And so that idea of, you know, looking at these things from that perspective and understanding that it's not just about, you know, extraterrestrials and little green men from that, you know, it is a massive thing that could be confronting us, you know, around changing all of these belief systems overnight, but also offering a lot of technology that could change the way we live. So it is this constant, you know, thing for this movement to have to re-identify itself, because it's constantly in this place of discovery. You look at the idea of MK Ultra, how does that have to do with UFOs? Well, there's classified projects that have been experimenting on American citizens, and that's public knowledge out there. You know, a lot of these experiencers, a lot of these abductees are talking about other military presences there. Does our military have an involvement in this? And if they do, we're looking at like what Whitley is talking about, you know, what happened with the nuclear experiment or the Tuskegee experiments, where it's a group of people that have been victimized and need to have some type of accountability. So what are your thoughts kind of, you know, moving forward around merging all of these different aspects that fall into the you know, the community of disclosure around these unacknowledged programs and around the technology that's behind them? How do we pull ourselves together and move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think what sounds to me what you're moving toward in this question is like getting a sense of what is the sum total of this reality that we're dealing with. So you mentioned military involvement. I personally believe that there is covert military It sounds pretty out there, but I'm just going to tell people this is what I believe. I believe that there is covert military collaboration with non-human groups. I can't say that I know this for sure, but I think that's probably the case. I've talked to enough individuals who have had regression experiences and memories, like definite memories of being taken to underground facilities with human and non-human captors, and the human captors being military in certain cases. And I believe these people. So I think that that is going on. And I mean, I'm not the only one to get these types of stories. What we're trying to figure out is like, what is the true nature of the entire situation that we're dealing with? And that's very difficult to understand. What I personally think is happening is that our species is vaulting into its next stage of human existence, what I often have been calling the fourth stage of humanity. You know, we've got hunters and gatherers as stage one, agriculture, basically stage two, science and industry is stage three, and now we're moving into essentially, let's call it transhumanist stage. It's a stage that I'm not looking forward to at all, but who cares what I think? This is happening. So we're moving into an era of quantum computing, of very strong artificial intelligence, of 5G, 6G, smart devices that will surveil every single thing happening in your world. You'll have no privacy ever again. Algorithms figuring out your predictive modeling of your behavior better than you could predict, and all of that. And then the robo-apocalypse, basically algorithms taking more and more human jobs. Like, we're just moving into a completely different, a radically different society, like now, all at once. That's happening. So in that's going to be disempowering for individuals. I mean, unless you want to become a celebrity millionaire in a virtual reality, fine, be my guest. That'll happen. But in actual reality, I think people are going to be powerless. But as a collective, human species is going to have a tremendous amount of power. Scientific, military power, the weapons, good Lord. I mean, so any of these other beings that are observing us, and I think there are multiple of them, they see this. They see that we're leaping into their world. We don't even realize it, but we're doing it. Some members of our civilization do realize this, but most don't. So it's not like we're just going to be powerless forever and ever. Like, we're not going to be powerless. We're actually going to have some ability to annoy a number of the people in the local community, I have a feeling. And so they're watching us, and probably more than watching us. They're probably managing us to some extent right now. If they were smart, that's what they would be doing. That's not necessarily in our best interest. Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't, but it's probably in theirs. So there's this monitoring going on. I think that's definitely happening. There's collaboration at a very covert level going on. And if that were to be let out publicly, look, I mean, I always will support disclosure of all the truth of UFOs, but let us not kid ourselves. There are some truths about this that are probably going to be very, very disturbing, that will not go over well for many people. I suspect that. One of the disturbing things is probably some form of infiltration into our society. I mean, this sounds like Invasion of the Body Snatchers or some kind of scare them up thing. But look, I mean, let's just put our cards on the table here and look at this logically. All right. We've got many, many stories of human-looking beings that are not human. You played one clip of mine. There's a lot of those. Of these beings, they look just like us, but they're telepathically powerful. They've got the ability to merge within our society to some extent. And if you listen to people like Dave Jacobs, to actually neurologically control you and manipulate your thoughts. And even if you don't want to listen to Jacobs, there's countless other researchers that talk about this. So there's infiltration that's probably happened, and probably within some seriously powerful organizations. In the film, you've got Linda Moulton Howe. She talks about some of her contacts. One in particular, DIA, retired guy from the DIA who talked to her in 1999 and talked explicitly about the fact that any of the three main groups that he knew of could look human at any time. And he said this to her. And so now that's just another story, but it is just another story, one of many. So when we're trying to talk about the big picture here, what is actually happening? Are we even in the driver's seat of this little civilization of ours, or are we not? And here's another thing to think about. Right now, we are all in the midst of a global, let's just say it for what it is, fascist revolution. All right? Let's just be real here. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it authoritarian. You can call it totalitarian. I've called it both of those. I think fascist works pretty well, frankly. Now, when people use the word fascist, they think like Mussolini or Hitler and fists pounding on podiums and cult of the leader. That's not fascism. That's 1930s fascism, but that's not an inherent quality. You could have a totally bureaucratic, technocratic, boring fascism. And you don't even have to have a violent fascism if you got total digital control of populations. Maybe you don't need to round them up with batons and guns and beat the hell out of them all the time. You can just control them digitally.
Exactly. Who needs guns and batons when you've got algorithms, right? We're about to kind of wrap up the rest of this conversation here and move it over to Oren.tv. So I'll just let you kind of finish up the last part of that, and then we'll jump to...
Let me finish this.
Yeah.
Yes. The point being this. We're looking at this global revolution happening all around us, and it's not fun. And you've got to ask yourself, what is the relationship between our human leadership and whoever these other beings are, and do they have any say in this, and are they behind any of this whatsoever? I don't know the answer to this, but this is a question that, like, we'd be fools not to ask. We'd be fools not to ask.
I couldn't agree more. And so, this movement here, as it's, coming together more and more and getting traction in regards to the mainstream and the grassroots then pushing against that attraction in the mainstream that it has right now, this is a really prime time for anybody that does care about this topic to really look at how you can become a force of digital direct action. We live in a digital world right now, and so a big part of that is understanding how to hashtag and group our topics together so we can research and observe together and watch for anomalies together. And the observer movement and the idea of, if you've experienced something, if you've gone through this and you'd like to kind of speak out about it and talk about it and feel a part of wanting to break this stuff open and pull out there, use that hashtag, the observers there, the observers movement, the observers film. If you've watched the film and you feel connected to the topic, share about these things, share clips. We've got a lot of great footage that's being put out to all your guys' social media of all the great cutting room floor stuff. And I think we're going to head over to the Oren.tv here, where all of the incredible roundtable interviews that you guys did, the individual micro exposés, those are all being available on Oren with, I think, only $1 sign up right now. But anyhow, I'll pitch it down to Jimmy here, and I'll meet you back over there, Richard.
Great. Thanks, Roger.
Mm-hmm.
I think Jimmy's muted.
No, that's me. That's my own mute button. Yeah, that's mine. It was amazing for me, and thank you, Richards and Richard. You guys, that's a Las Vegas thing. That's like at Bally's. I can see it. Richards and Richard this week. That was amazing for me to just sit back and listen to you guys just organically let that flow. And I didn't want to jump in. It was just too good. Lots of great points. Now, I've let everybody know that in the chat room and throughout social media that we're going to shift gears. We're going to take this over to Oren. And for everybody, it's AUYRN.TV. I've got the links up in social media. When you head over to Oren, once we sign off here, then we go live over there. If you're going over there now, there's nothing there because we haven't switched over. But anyway, so when it ends here at the top of the page, just go all the way to the top. You'll see a little live button with a little green antenna right there. That's the live button. Click on that. And now, as if this wasn't good enough, the really good secret conversation happens over at Oren TV. So I'll see you guys in a couple of minutes over at Oren. Thank you so much. I'm yours, Jimmy Church. Fade to black. I'm going to sign off for now. Chris, take me over to Oren.
shocking, hard-hitting film exposing the darkest secrets of the FBI and CIA. 1,000 Pieces is a coup being carried out before our very eyes.
You're allowed to protest, millions of people on one day in crowds yelling, screaming, but you try to run your business, you get arrested?
Wall Street has laundered $100 trillion from trafficking in children and drugs.
The agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
Mr. Secretary, is it policy of the U.S. government to reward companies that traffic in women and little girls?
Human trafficking has many more victims than COVID.
The complicity of the CIA, the FBI, the Justice Department.
There's corruption on both sides.
These agencies are facing a time of reckoning.
Are we at yet another crossroads? Get ready. 1,000 Pieces.
It was so hard to come running out of a hell that nobody believed existed. My name is Kathy O'Brien, and I'm a survivor of MK Ultra mind control. The MK Ultra program was to ultimately control the minds of the population for implementing what Adolf Hitler first termed the New World Order. When girls reached age 30, they were murdered or they were sacrificed. I was going to be killed as well. I was to go out in a blaze of glory and be burned alive. I'm so fortunate that an intelligence insider who saw the kind of corruption that was going on in the highest levels of government decided to take action and rescued me and saved my life so that we could begin to expose what was being done.
Ancient teachings around the world see family and community as containers for wisdom. The stability and connectivity of the family is seen as necessary to ensure that information travels intact from one's ancestors through the stable family and into the community, where it's bundled and prepared to be sent as far into the future as possible. But for decades, a quiet war has been waged by globalists, communists, and social engineers with a single target in their sights: the traditional family unit. Can we rediscover this ancient ideal of family as a technology for transmitting wisdom? Superorganism, the family unit, coming soon to Orin.